Friday afternoon, everyone, here in Honolulu. Ted Ralston, the host of our show, Where the Road Leads, here at ThinkTech Hawaii Studios. As you know, we said last time, this show is defined totally by the people who come on it as guests. And we thought we went over the top last week. We're going over the top again this week. So it's fantastic having our panel you'll meet in a minute here. Our discussion last time was called Cyber in Paradise. And we were talking about this very difficult, arcane subject of cyber, and how it affects us personally, how it affects us as a community, and how to even think about this. We had a couple of great discussions at the table here. We had John Mullen on from a cyber security operation in San Francisco assisting us on Skype. And just to show you how we're affected ourselves by cyber, we had up until 15 minutes ago, we thought we were gonna have John back on from San Francisco, and another guy, Roger Insay from the Sacramento County Emergency Services Department. We thought we'd have him on as well, but right now we're repairing a cyber issue, so we're not going to have them on. We are now exactly where Hawaii is. We're dependent on our local resources. So here we go. First of all, I'd like to remind folks that technology is about solving problems. It isn't necessarily about the specific design of a circuit board or something like that. So we're going to try to solve problems here, but we're going to first introduce the problem once again. And the problem we're talking about is, after we discussed it last week at the big level, how do we take cyber and whatever that means and express it, operate on it, and apply it and solve it at the community level? How do we get our communities interested and involved in cyber issues so that whatever the downside effects of cyber malfunctions are, malfeasance are, we have a way to protect ourselves here in Hawaii from that sort of thing. So joining us at the table today, from last week, last time anyway, we have General Darryl Wong, who heads the National Guard and the Office of Emergency Preparedness, I think it is here in Hawaii. And obviously, cyber is a big thing in Darryl's mind, and I think it's more than just this. The cyber is the connectivity. Cyber is the city that holds us all together. So that's a really important thing for public figures such as Darryl to be heavily concerned about. We have, on my left, we have Margee Ralston. This sounds like a family affair, doesn't it? She's sitting in for Frencha Kaliumoku, who is the community coordinator in Waimanalo of HARP. And we'll have Frencha on at some point in time. Frencha, if you're out there watching, Frencha is a gal who gets things done. And once you meet Frencha, you want to have her on your side. She's a great gal. And we have Sterling Yee from Oceanit right down the way, practitioners and creators of quite impressive solutions involving communication systems and cyber solutions. So we have a fantastic panel on, and next time, cyber allowing us, we'll bring John and Roger from California into the picture, who, by the way, are very interested in what's going on here. They see a lot of value in taking forward to California what they're seeing here just on that one conversation last week in terms of the high level of community involvement. So, cyber at the community level, expressing it, understanding it, operating on it. Darryl, you have probably the greatest view of what the downside issues are if we don't pay attention to this at the community level. Say a few words to get us headed in that direction.
I think, it's an issue that a lot of people don't understand. Those in the industry, the critical infrastructure understand because of the industrial systems that can get taken down. But, people at the community level, they think the industry needs to worry about that more. So as we get back down into the communities that we're talking about, is how do you introduce it into the communities so it's something that is meaningful to them. It touches, their heart, it touches their minds, rather than this big strategic thought of taking down a grid or taking out a water system. That doesn't resonate, in a community or in a family. So we really need to teach it way down to a really much basic level that is meaningful to a community, to a family, to an individual. And then as we talk about future of K-12 education, then how do you take it down into the high schools and elementary schools, where it matters to them and it's taught to them, or awareness is made to them at the level that it should be made, and not at some level that they would just kind of turn their eyes away from.
So we're talking about personalizing it in that regard, so we understand how it affects us as individuals and as persons. Sterling, your organization deals in that very subject. iMercy, we've had here at the table and talking about that. How does the industry see this problem that the General discussed? How do you see this from an industry perspective?
I think it's very similar. You know, you can always look at it in terms of just the technology, and I used to be guilty of that. You know, in the early days, it was all about the technology, and it was wonderful. But you know, the technology to me is kind of a slam dunk today. Right now, what you need is you need to have the people make it successful, or people can make it fail. And security is the same way. And I think you need to make it personal. I've had my credit cards compromised. I know what it feels like. I know what it's like to go to the banks and have to, you know, change all of these things. And I know the fear of every time I open up my statement, what am I going to see? And I think, Darryl, you're right. You've got to make it personal, because I think for a person who's never experienced that, maybe it's not real.
And at the larger level, if you had a disruption in communications, for example, like the one we're facing just right today here in the studio, but if those things are one step above personal, but they're more at a group level, same issue, a school being isolated, for example, by some means, a section of town, a function such as transportation management, the stoplight management, this sort of thing. So let me ask Margee how you and Frencher would see that. How do we take that down, say, into Waimanalo? How do we take the actual daily experience of life in Waimanalo and inject into it issues that aren't threatening but are instructive in terms of cyber factors?
Well, that's a very interesting way to put it. To bring it personally down to everyone's level, you have to look at the people that you're serving, and the people in Waimanalo are very interested in their neighbors, they're very interested in family, and they're very interested in staying in contact with the people that they're close with, maybe at neighbor islands or in the next community. So I would say that something that had to do with their communications with people they knew really well, that they would want to communicate with in a disaster, or even on a daily level. Call your mom in the morning, how is she doing? Because mom's not doing, you know, she might be in the hospital. That sort of thing could be a start, where you would start to communicate, and then you could add different areas that might be more business-like or more to do with the ongoing activities that you would do in disaster management rather than a personal level, but start with things that they would understand at a personal level and move out from there. And the General has the module for the HARP activities, and maybe we could find a place in there to insert some of the information so we could bring it to the people at the meetings and talk to them, and they could take it to the people that they meet with in their areas. We have the Kupuna housing, and the people there are very open with their residents there and other people in the neighborhood. So there's many ways to get it spread at a personal level, and always the goal is to reach as many people as possible.
So you're sort of thinking in terms of social clusters, be they neighborhood watch groups, Kupuna housing groups, large extended families, whatever it might be. There's clusters that people form into, and that's a point of entry to.
Yeah, I think, you know, as we have this group, and, you know, we have the HARP group meeting, and we have other kind of CERT groups meeting, we have tsunami zone groups meeting, but to almost ask them, you know, how do you use your computers? How do you use your phone? How do you do this? And then tell them the threat to how they're using it and how they can better defend themselves. As, you know, Arnold talked about last week about, you know, walking down the street and not going in dark alleys, the same thing as surfing on a computer, that you don't go into a site that you're not sure of. But people might not know that you may get malware embedded in your system, and then all of a sudden you email a relative and that thing transfers over. So the awareness of what can happen, just on simple things like that, I think could make people more aware of what cyber is really home to them, and how they can even spread things to their relatives if they email a letter to them, or they transfer an email that says, oh, pass this on to your family. So those simple things like that, I think, can really help.
On the industry side, Sterling, do you guys have think tanks or groups that deal with this situation, I mean, you almost think that the bad guys are one step ahead of us in this game, and so.
Yes, they are.
Watching for what's happening.
They are, yeah.
Okay. They get their scientists and engineers from somewhere. I wonder where they get them from. That's another question, I guess, but maybe they get the top pick coming out of the schools, who knows? But,
Yeah, and who knows, I mean, some of them are just kids. I mean, they're, you know, elementary school, I mean, I don't know how they pick up this knowledge, but they do. It really comes down to awareness. You have to be aware that if you do something, you know, you've got to know what the downside is.
Could there be some awareness apps or something that we could put in our computers or our cell phones, or something that would be like a civil defense drill, something like that? Every fourth Tuesday, you get some, this is test only, you know, or this is only a drill, but some way to exercise your mind in terms of what downside things are typical of what's going on today?
I mean, I don't know how well that would be accepted, but definitely, I mean, that's a good idea. I think, you know, every time I look at something new, the first thing I think about is, okay, what's the downside? You know, a good example is just a couple of days ago, I was in San Francisco, and I was with a relative of mine, and we were going from Fisherman's Wharf to Union Square, and I said, well, we got a choice. You could take the cable car, and it was like $6.50 per person. And she said, no, we're going to use Uber. And I went, okay. She pulled out her phone, and you know, she had her account, and she pushed the button, and it says, okay, the car is coming. It's being driven by a guy named Jose. He's driving a Nissan Sentra. It's black, and he will be there in 2 minutes. And it shows you a map, and it shows you him coming down to get you, so you know when to expect it. And of course, when you go up to the car, I say, Jose, and he says, yes, are you? And he knows my name because, you know, I made the call. We go into the car, he drives us over, we get out, and that's it. My receipt gets emailed to me, and it was cheaper than taking the cable car. It was, I think it was a $9 fare, which would have been almost $13 had gone by the Muni. Now, the first thing I'm thinking about is, okay, how safe is my credit card, right?
Right.
Yes.
It's got your phone number.
Right.
And, yeah.
And my phone number, and yeah.
So do you think that if that idea makes sense, some kind of training apps that would periodically exercise us?
It just makes you think about what it is that you're doing. And, you know, then the problem with that is you can't cover every situation because you don't know, you know, what will come up. You know, and again, I'm picking on an Uber app. I think it's a wonderful service. It worked very well. But, you know, I think in terms of the people skills, we've got to get our people to start to think about, is this safe? You know, it's like what Arnold said, is this a dark alley? Or is this a lighted one? Is it a somewhat dimly lit one, but it's okay? You don't know.
What if we took, let me just propose something at the table, then we'll take a break and come back and talk about it. But what if we took some folks that you might know about in industry, and folks you don't know about in emergency services, and maybe some folks at the university, and conceive an application of some kind? Maybe not have to write it, but conceive what it might do. And then have it run along as a test case at Makani Pahili next year. Maybe have a group of people who want to volunteer to report on what this is like to receive this thing in your email from time to time, and see if that is something we could use, almost like a PSA, a public service announcement, but configured in a technical sense. Let me just put that on the table and see what folks think about it. And anybody out there who wants to get a hold of us, there's a way to do that. Zuri can tell us what that is, but we'll do that when we come back from our break in about 30 seconds.
Aloha, I'm Hunter Hevelin, host of Sustainable Hawaii here at ThinkTech Hawaii. You can tune in every week on Thursday at 2 p.m. to see interviews with sustainability professionals from around the state and even further abroad, learning about activities with water management, food security, waste management, and a whole host of other fascinating opportunities to get engaged with making a greener island. So if you're interested in making the transition from consuming individuals to communities of producers, check us out every Thursday. Aloha.
Friday afternoon in Honolulu, folks, Where the Road Leads, our show here with ThinkTech Hawaii Studios, our excellent guests, General Wong, Hawaii National Guard, Margee Ralston, sitting in for Frencha Kaliumoku out of Waimanalo, and Sterling Yee of Oceanit, and we're talking about this very important subject once again, which we'll probably be talking about for the next 50 years until something else shows up that replaces it in terms of criticality, and that's this general term cyber, which is such a big term. General Zabrowski, I think, Admiral Zabrowski was one of the major creators of this term and expressing it in this way. I mean, cyber means a lot of things, probably different things to every person you can think of. But what we were talking about is how do we get this notion of cyber expressed in terms of cyber threats to us as individuals personalized so that we pay more attention to them without having our credit card actually really ripped off. But then General Wong brings up an interesting point. At the end of the day, it's really the security, and that doesn't mean just guns and guards, but that means food security, transportation security, health security for this island state. And that relates to our partners on the Rim and our military partners here at Pacific Command. So a entry point into the cyber domain from anywhere could affect the larger stability here in Hawaii. So the idea I had thought of, just sitting here at the table, which is how we do this, unscripted, we just cook stuff up as we're on the fly here, is maybe some kind of an app. I use that term because I don't know how to write them myself, but people tell you about apps all the time, right? And some younger people at this table might actually be able to write these things. It doesn't include me. But something that we could generate here that's appropriate to Hawaii and is easy enough to generate that in 6 months we could run beta cases in Makani Pahili or some similar exercise and see what the population thinks of becoming involved at this level. And I will go back to something. I was working with domestic security and homeland security and this sort of thing at the end of my career. And we were working with the Israelis a lot. They are big into public service announcements that don't last very long, 10 seconds. And very, very simple TV shots. If you see a guy wearing shoes at the beach, that's something that doesn't fit. So just pay attention to it. So that sort of thing, very, very simple. So if we could conceive of something like that where you would then be shown what it looks like to get a cyber threat.
It's that whole issue of awareness. You know, if somebody helps you become aware of what some of the things are out there and give you some clues as to what to look for, I think that would be really, really helpful.
And to the point you were making, Marty, about community groups, we've got churches, we've got community groups, we've got clubs, we've got, besides family units, that would all be places where you could do an inject here with something that was practical. You know, the whole concept of HARP has taken on a lot of interesting, it's got a lot of momentum going now.
Yes.
And it was hard for me to imagine it would really go a couple of years ago, but it is just accelerating. Waimanalo, Kailua,
Manoa.
other places.
Manoa.
And
Eva.
so there's a message here. People are willing to listen to these things, these difficult issues that we have to deal with. So maybe running on the back of HARP, running on the back of the neighborhood watches, these groups that are already starting to come together, we could throw in a cyber layer.
I have a suggestion.
Please.
I signed up a few weeks ago, late in the game, I'm sure, but it's for the traffic alerts from the honolulu.gov. And so I voluntarily signed up for it as a citizen. So I said, please send them to me. And I get them as a text, or I can get them as an email. And they come up on my computer or on my phone. Well, if we could have an app that had that same sort of put it on the honolulu.gov or one of those places and say, are you interested in having any of this information? If you are, just click on the app, and then people that could voluntarily, in other words, volunteer for the program, and it would be very similar, or even run by the same group that runs the one with the Honolulu Police Department. So that's one way of activating it, you know, just a suggestion.
You know, one thing is, you know, as you know, Ted, in the military, they'll lock your computer down if you don't go through an information assurance type course, and you do it annually. To me, you know, our maybe very good companies do that, but as a whole, there should be some basic computer module that you go through just to understand the information assurance and how you should take care of your computer and what you shouldn't do. And that could be something very simple that could be out there, that could be sponsored by, you know, any company, that people, like you say, you could download it and just go through that module. And you have a kind of a basic understanding of just basic things you should look for in things. To me, I think companies should have something like that within their own companies, and their company computers would be locked out if each employee does not go through this module. That's just something very simple. To me, you know, adult education classes can do this also. Somehow, you introduce it in K-12 classes, because a lot of schools are going totally on computers now.
Yeah.
So just think what you can do for exams. How
Yeah.
creative you can get if someone wanted to disrupt exams and things. So I think all this, since schools are going that way, schools need to have an education of, you know, if you got an iPad or if you're using your computer, you know, what's required for you not to compromise what you have. And if they don't know how to use it or don't secure it well enough, that they won't have use of it. I mean, and that's gotta be a consequence.
That's an interesting point. You're right. The kids who are small kids at 3 years old are on computers these days. And the kindergarten are probably on at this point in time, I would guess. That everyone will touch them of that group growing up, not like us who came into it late in our lives. So that's the place to generate this awareness and this concept of testing, a concept of alerting, alert function of some kind. And we didn't think about that. So we need adult education in this regard, but the place to really hit it hard is in that K through 12 area once again. And that makes me wonder if our friends right down the street here, good friends at NDPTC, the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center, which is right around your building, I think.
Yeah.
We should talk with them. We're doing a UAV program for them right now, and I wonder if there isn't interest on their part of thinking about the consequences of cyber as a disaster preparedness function.
Definitely.
So, if we were to, well, let me ask Sterling, what would it take to actually take this idea of a app that has variable cyber threats built into it as a test only? What would it take to write something like that?
Yeah. Again, not being a programmer myself, but I've seen them written. I've seen them at Oceanit being written. I've seen them at other areas being written, and I don't think it would take that much. I think it's more the maintenance of it afterward. You know, as new things come out, we need to update it to reflect some of the newer things. Also, as the tech continues to evolve, new versions of the operating system comes up, you're going to have to just kind of move this thing along. So I think that's probably where, you know, more of the long-term commitment will need to be. I think just to get it written, I think we can do that. We need the commitment then to kind of carry it forward and carry with that the message that this is here to help our community's awareness of what some of these problems are.
You talk about that, I mean, my son always wanted to write computer games, but, you know, he's not doing that. But I just thought, you know, passwords are very important. You know, like if you talk to DHS and some of these other guys, everyone uses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, the most common ones are so common.
Secret.
But you could, you could.
Oh, that
you
was a
could-
secret.
You could devise a game of, you know, you get more points if you can create stronger passwords. So, you know, it could be an app or a game of just password building, because that's something everyone has to develop to secure. And I think a lot of people use very simple passwords, but I think it would strengthen your mind in how to create passwords. But then it's a game, because the stronger it gets, you just score more points or do something. So we should form a company and develop that game.
Okay, it's called Oceanit, right?
But, you know, everyone likes games, and so they're sitting around hey, this is a strong password, you get so many points. I don't know if the computer can hack into it, or, you know, you develop something else and you get more points. So, one, it would make you develop stronger passwords in your own mind, right? And you understand how strong passwords should be.
It's sort of like a monopoly that's been hacked, and the rules change because somebody has invaded your information space.
Well, I just
So,
talk that because, you know, DHS always tells us that people get hacked because they have such common passwords. And all of us, you know, everything we do, we have so many different passwords. And I'm constantly forgetting them anyway, so I'm constantly have to redo them.
You know, and that's the other thing, of course, you can, all you have to do is know the person's email address and you can get them to mail you a new password. I mean,
That's true.
this stuff is not ironclad.
No.
So then we need to form a hackers team that tries to actually hack stuff for real, which I'm sure we have lots of around.
And I think in the past, recent past, we've had groups come together. I know under the city's administration, the last administration, Gordon Bruce had people coming together doing these hackathons with kids, having them develop apps. And I think he was the one that had these kids develop some of the apps that the city is using today.
Wow.
Was that here in Honolulu?
Yes, under the previous mayor.
So, it's been done before. We
Yes.
can do it again. What organization would be interested in sponsoring something like that, or who should we go see tomorrow?
I think you have local companies that are very involved in that. You know, Oceanit is one, Reference
That-
is another one. That, I mean, I think we have local companies that have a strong interest in securing our, you know, our systems here.
Right.
And they should be helping, leading the way in this.
Because in the end, there are resources as a community, and you know, every time something gets broken into, we lose. We as the community members lose.
We experienced that the other day. We were witnessing this minor issue, I guess, in the scale of things, but it was a car break-in, and I was just somewhat surprised by almost the lack of technical support of the folks prosecuting the event. It just took forever to get very simple information. And I was thinking to myself that we have apps that do everything. We ought to be able to have an app that helps a guy take a police report.
Sure.
But maybe they don't do it that way so they can not get cracked, not get hacked. But
Yeah.
This is a complicated subject. My head's trying to figure out
It is.
how to take it forward. Referential, certainly, see those guys, and
That's their forte.
maybe we, in the first of the year or something, gather a few people together at this table and talk about that very subject. How do we cook something up that'll work in the next 6 months and have it available in parallel to Makani Pahili? Of course, the Makani Pahili planners are done in February, I presume, with getting that exercise all set up.
Well, I mean, the venues are out there. I mean, if you were to add or tweak things, I think it's still possible.
And then I think I'd like to suggest that we in Waimanalo run this carefully by the various Waimanalo organizations and see if anybody there would be interested in being a test case for something like this. I think that the amateur radio guys would for sure,
Yeah.
and perhaps some others.
And I think that's really, really critical, because I think you've got to get the people to buy into this. You know, whatever it is that we do, it's got to be something that they will do. And so that means that it needs to be simple, something that they understand, and something that they feel they can do.
And then what that tells you is that to go to them and ask them what the figure of merit would be, what the measure of success would be for something that enters their life in this way that they never really asked for.
Right.
We could do that. We could stand up that test case and find out if we can get the community to help us form what the objects are, the object lessons are, and then work backwards into the software guys to actually cook up something that does the job. Interesting. Obviously, we need to include somebody at UH in this discussion. We can in fact, we're seeing Wayne Sharoma tomorrow, so I think we'll drop this in front of him and see what he thinks. He's electrical engineering, which is a likely place to deposit something like this. So that was my idea that we threw on the table before the break, and let's carry on. Let's take another break and carry on and see if we can find one or two other pieces that fit this picture after we come back in 30 seconds.
Hi, I'm Jay Fidel. I'm one of the 20 hosts at ThinkTech Talks, and we have 20 shows, 4 every afternoon. One of the shows that I host is Agritech in the Islands. We cover agriculture, aquaculture, aquaponics, hydroponics, you name it, everything around agriculture. We want to show you what's going on all over the state in agriculture. Come and watch 4 to 5 p.m. on Mondays. I'm Jay Fidel here at ThinkTech Talks. Aloha.
Here we are, folks, Friday afternoon in downtown Honolulu in the ThinkTech Hawaii studios. Ted Ralston, your host of our show, Where the Road Leads, talking about the most complicated thing we've ever spoken on in this show, and that's this issue of cyber. What it means to us personally, how do we make it personal, how do we prepare ourselves for issues, because we know there's folks out there who are preparing to take us down the cyber path if they possibly can. General Darryl Wong, head of the Hawaii National Guard, Sterling Yee, scientist and engineer over at Oceanit, and Margee Ralston, you must be related to me in some way, out of Waimanalo, sitting in for Francois Kaliliumoku. So we had some discussions about perhaps a citizen involvement through an application of some kind, and General Wong suggested video games. That's a brilliant idea because all the kids these days are playing them, and they all have computers in school, and they all have 2 or 3 iPads or something like that they run around with. So computer games are a great idea here. Now, there's 2 sides to that. You also train the other guys by having computer games that show us how to make passwords resolute, for example. Somebody who has a different opinion might use that game to figure out how to reason through how we create our passwords, for example. So this is all about intelligence in one way, shape, or form. Intelligence as it applies here in Hawaii. But the video game idea, let's chat about that you thought of, General. You're involved a lot with Iolani and with the other schools in the Alawai and such, so you have a pretty good finger on the pulse of what's taking place in the education community.
Well, the thing is, you know, you got really smart high school kids.
Yeah.
Yes.
For us old guys to try to show them how to teach themselves.
Right.
Some of them know how to teach themselves. So I think this is a problem we could give to some of these high schools to say, develop a solution for us that you understand, that you think you can teach into the lower grades. You know, for us to go to the lower grades and talk about cyber, they're gonna kind of look at us and say,
We're these old guys,
yeah,
right?
we're these old guys. This is
Roll
way
their
past
eyes.
it, yeah. But for a high school student to go down there and relate to them very well, so it's who brings the message and what message you bring and at what level, because you're the one. But I think these high school students are really smart. I mean, they're more into this thing than we are. I mean, you know, a company like Oceanit is out in defending the grid. You know, of course, they could also talk about, you know, your own laptop computer, but, you know, truly these high school students could probably give you a pretty good solution. And they could form their own company.
I was going to say that they really are at the top of the list when it comes to the next generation. And some of them are already there, even at 15, 16 years old.
Oh, absolutely.
And you could have a state Hawaii contest, you know, see which kids and which schools could come up with the best app and use the top 5. You don't have to pick one, you know, or 10.
I mean, it's all about awareness, and this would
Yes.
generate awareness. You know, there's the Cyber Patriot game, you know, you got robotics. This would just be something else to raise awareness.
That's a fascinating thought, and I just thought of an idea as you said.
Yeah.
You know, we deal with the
Go there.
UAVs a lot, and even in UAVs, at the low end of the spectrum there are now simulations showing up. There's software simulations, you get a control unit and software, and I suspect you can inject failures. I don't know if you can have engine failures or this sort of thing in that level of software, but the UAV people are as much playing with the simulators as they are flying UAVs. So a cyber simulator,
That'd be great.
along the lines of what you're suggesting, a cyber dominance of the world, something like that would be and how do you crack that nut? And you can have it at different levels. I got a meeting tomorrow at UH with Wayne Sharoma will be there. I'd like to, with your permission, present this idea to him and see what he thinks about a student task or something at the university level, which isn't far from the K through 12 level, and they can probably still communicate with the folks at that level. And see what they think about how we might approach something like this.
Yeah, because this topic isn't only an engineering topic. This is a topic that should be taught in business schools, in the law school, in social sciences, because it transcends everything. There's no boundaries to this.
And health, for that matter. So these
Yes.
things are all subject to being held at risk by virtue of the cyber functions. How do we think about the guys, how do we characterize them who are on the other side of this? The people, we talked about them a little bit earlier, the hackers. Some of them are just young kids having fun, but there must be some pattern out there or some way to identify what the patterns are and why people are doing this to us. What?
Well, I think short of being in an environment like maybe you're in a country where that's maybe unofficially at war with the United States, so you know they're being told to do that. Yeah, I think it's a matter of getting them, making them aware that you have a chance to make a difference. It could be a positive difference or a negative difference, you know. And really, the positive ones have more benefit on the upside than the negative ones. The negative ones, if you get caught, you go to jail, right? If you create something that's great, you become rich. Somehow that awareness has to be sent out to the kids so that they understand that, yes, you've got these skills, but you've got a choice to make. You can make a difference positively, you know, and hopefully you don't go down the dark path.
And
So
we
that's
want
a-
to keep those kids here in Hawaii. We've got
Oh,
some of those
absolutely.
really, really smart kids that are coming through the schools and at UH, and we don't want them to feel like they have to go to the mainland to get a job that's going to
Right.
pay really well. So, I mean, maybe this sector is a nice opening for some of them to see a bright future. Like they can take some of these ideas and go into business and stay right home and help us and
Correct.
keep their families here.
So we have a behavior modification challenge here in order to understand what it is that compels people to want to be a hacker. You know, the more we're talking about this, the more I realize how close I am to the edge of getting hacked, I'm sure. I mean, I have no idea what the nature of the threat's coming.
That would be you.
That would be one of them right
Just
there.
a hack.
Sorry. So, you know, you get these things like when you buy a book on Amazon or something, it tells you 6 other books that people bought that you bought the same book. So they're snooping on me. They know what I like airplane books, and so I get books about airplanes in advertisements all the time. Peter, there's pattern recognition going on.
Oh yes, yes.
Around here, that is the basis of a lot of the hacker mentality, I would presume. If you can identify a pattern, you can figure out a way to intercept that pattern and get in there. So I realize that personally I'm probably at risk in ways that I don't even know. How do we track the future of these risks? As these risks change and mature through technology, through intelligence.
You know, I mean, not to get too in the strategic side of it, but, you know, every time someone hacks you and you defend against it, it changes it already. So, I mean, it's constantly morphing because they already know, you know that they're hacking and you know how to defend it. So they're going to modify it again. So there is nothing stable in this thing. It's constantly changing and it'll morph and continue to morph. And the way it's morphing, it's just accelerating. So that's why it has to be taught from kindergarten all the way up to understand the potential problem of it. Because, you know, 10 years from now, it's not going to be, or even 2 years from now, it's not going to be the problem that we're looking at today. It'll continue to morph itself in a way much quicker than we've ever thought.
Do we have any idea whether there's been any large-scale hack attacks on Hawaii? I don't even know how to ask that question or who to ask it of, but we're speaking, you know, we had the big discussion last week, we took it down to the community and the personal level today, but it does ultimately matter at the level of society. Have we had any attempts to.
You have Best Buy, and you have the ones at the
Well, let's
large
see, yeah,
container
Target-
stores,
Target's been whacked,
Target, and
uh,
those. And
Home
and-
Depot.
And there may be some that you don't want to talk about, that may have, you don't want to broadcast
Well,
it.
I mean, there are ongoing attacks in the statewide at every level. But, I think the company should talk about it, and not any one of us who may have information about it, because it's not our place to say. But it is a problem in Hawaii. I mean, it's not on the mainland, it's not in Wall Street, it's right here already. So it's, the object is how do you gonna identify who's doing it and for what reasons they're doing it, and then how do you defend it?
So you're suggesting something interesting here. Just as we talked earlier about the community and personal involvement, we also need to get there's a recognition that the large companies, the large industries have a responsibility here. They're making us dependent on them. We are dependent on them, and we're all dependent on cyber to connect us together. So they have a higher level of obligation than, say, a mom and pop shop somewhere has, in terms of being cautious and aware. And it would be interesting to have them in on this conversation about how we get the community people interested, because I suspect they would benefit from that. Is there any kind of a group here in Honolulu or Hawaii itself that meets to talk about that at the infrastructure level?
I know there's a group, a CIO group that meets.
Mhm.
I don't know if they've created their own CISO group, which is, your cyber defenders in your companies. I mean, that could be a group that you could bring and talk.
Especially with the recent announcement this week of HECO, or HEI, being now part of the larger organization out of Florida. That's, I think, the largest in the country, are they not? The largest
Sure.
power generating hui in the country. So it's an opportunity to suggest something to them right now. It's a break in the action a bit, and we could think of meeting somebody there and proposing this idea to them. I would, nothing to lose in making the proposal. So we can talk at the top level and suggest ideas. We've come up with a couple of ideas here at the mid-level. And I love this idea of yours of a competition between video game composers or writers.
I would ask you to even invite, people at UH, because they secure their systems there. Jody Ito would be someone you could bring here, and maybe some of these high schools, because I'm sure the high schools that are going totally to computer, they surely must have someone to understand how to secure it, because someone, like you said, you can compromise grades, you can compromise tests. The more you put it in a computer form, the more you can get it compromised. So I'm sure they have people that are thinking that way.
Years ago, when I was in school, just after the earth crusted over and I was in college, I remember reading about the first cyber attack I'd ever seen. It was pretty clever. Let me just put it on here for a bit of closing humor. But there was a company somewhere, and they went to a computer-generated paycheck system. And that worked fine until they found sometimes they would mash the checks in the printing process, so they put a loop in so you could generate a second paycheck that replaced the first one. And the gal who was running the machine thought, oh, it's not a bad idea. When I come to my name for my own paycheck, I'll just keep hitting the button a few times and generate multiple paychecks for myself. So that system, as functional as it was, had a serious hackable.
Well, like Sterling was saying, it's a human factor.
Right. It's really not the technology is doing what it was supposed to do, right? Which is to generate another one when the first one got damaged.
Okay. Well, what I'd like to do at the end, as we close the show every week, is ask folks who are on our panel what they hope that the folks out there watching might have taken away from this. So if you all had what would be your first item on the list of what you'd like to have the people listen to and think about coming off this? Let me turn first to girl first, to Margee Ralston, sitting in for Frencha Kalilimoku. And you can be either Frencha or Margee. But what would be your desired takeaway from the folks watching this today?
Well, I think I'll speak for myself, and hopefully Frencha would back me up. What I would take away is that we have a number of groups in our community, H. Harp is one, but we have other groups. We have the neighborhood board meetings and other places where a lot of significant people meet, and it's not that hard to generate their ideas and hopefully spread the word that we need to get this information out and get some feedback. I'm hoping the main word for me is feedback from people on what would be something that they would like to see as part of the security system.
Okay. Sterling, newcomer to our table here.
Okay. I think definitely it needs to be something that falls into the awareness category. And, you know, I think the more aware we can make our members of the community about what cyber brings to them, but also what the risks are. And when we do propose something, that we go back to them and we get their opinions as to whether or not this would work. Because not necessarily just because I came up with an idea that everybody would buy into it. We need to make sure that they buy into it, because otherwise, you know, it's like they say, it's the people that are going to make this thing work. We got to make sure that we somehow bring them along in this process.
So community buy-in is essential in this
Absolutely,
regard. Right.
absolutely.
That brings up another anecdote, if I can suggest anecdotes here. This is 25, 30 years ago, maybe 40. NASA helped the country of India coming up with solar cookers to improve the food quality, the health quality, and take care of some issues. But it failed to find out that the particular clan or group in India that was getting the benefit of this, they make dinner at 7 o'clock at night all year round. They weren't going to change their habits and start cooking dinner at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
So solar cookers aren't worth much at 7 o'clock at night. So it didn't matter. So nobody had, you know, NASA had a
Right.
wonderful design, but no buy-in. So it's just not going to work. So community buy-in, in fact, community driving the
Driving,
thing is
right,
what really that's
right.
all about. So that's really interesting. And that goes along with what you're talking about. So, sir, thoughts on what you'd like to have our audience take away from our discussion today?
You know, no, I think, you know, everything that everyone said is really important. You know, I guess my discussion would be that it is really a societal problem. It's not a problem with technology. It's not a problem on any specific company. It is everyone in our community has to be aware that, you know, it's going to be a problem if we're here to stay, and it's not going to get any better. So getting some type of education and awareness on it, and how you personally can secure your own computer or your phones and things, would be the beginnings of helping a lot of that. And then even companies having education within their own company would help also.
Well, it's just like when we were little kids in school, health, just learning about health and learning about personal health. This is like a different form of personal health. It's need to be taught at the same level, the same. The difference is the human body as a system reacts the same every time to something, and hasn't changed in 10,000 years. This thing is changing every 10,000 hours, right? So, interesting. Well, I'd like to thank our panel very much for coming on today, taking time out on Friday afternoon, do the traffic and such, and on the Arizona-Oregon football day, and the game's been going for an hour now. And
UH Duke volleyball game.
Yes,
volleyball,
ooh, that's a
right?
biggie.
Yeah.
Right.
And paddling for those of us who might be taking time out from that to come here on the table. Thank you very much, Sterling Yee and General Wong, and my gorgeous wife Margee, for coming on the panel today. And folks, we'll see you again a week from today. We'll actually be in Anniston, Alabama, and do our show by Skype from there, if we have Skype. If we don't have a cyber problem here.
They aren't cybered out.
And then we'll see you all. I think we're going to have Ken Conashiro on next Friday, talking about an update on your program, sir, Hawaii Exemplary State, which is related right down the strike zone here of cyber. So once again, folks, Ted Ralston, we're signing off for today. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next Friday. Have a nice weekend.